Welcome to The Untold Story. I'm Martha McCallum, and really pleased today to have Alina Habba with us. She will, you know her from all of our coverage over the past year and a half, 2 years. She was one of the most prominent attorneys for President Donald Trump, and we saw what happened in many of those cases as it played out, and she was a frequent guest. She will now be counselor to the president in the White House, and we welcome Alina Habba to the podcast. Hi, Alina.
Hi, I'm so happy to be with you, Martha.
Well, it's great to have you with us. And, you know, excited for the challenge that you're about to take on. But one of the things that I love to do in this Untold Story podcast is to have you share with us a little bit, because people have seen you so much, Alina. Tell them a little bit about your background, where your family comes from, you know, sort of a sense of who you are and how you got to where you are.
In real life. Not in fake life.
In real life,
not in work
baby.
Life. Yes, I'm a very normal person. I'm the daughter of immigrants who were from Iraq, from Baghdad, and they fled, obviously, Saddam Hussein and religious persecution from there, which is a lot why I love what I do, and I love fighting for our country for many reasons. Number one, I get it. Being persecuted unfairly because of politics, religion, anything is unacceptable, but also because I love this country. It gave us freedom. And so that's, you know, a big part of who I am and why I do what I do. I'm a mom. I have 2 children, 9 and 11, and a stepson who's 17. I always say I have 3 children because he feels like he's mine. Yeah. And I'm just a normal person, other than the fact that I work now in the West Wing. I love pasta more than life itself, and and I'm very bad about going to the gym.
You don't look like you love pasta, or that you're very bad about going to the gym. So you got to tell us how you pull that off.
That's genetics. That's God. Genetics. My mother's side.
That helps a lot. But you always look so professional and so great as you go through a very, very busy and pressured lifestyle. I just want to go back. Tell me a little bit more about your mom and dad and your religious background in Iraq and what that persecution was like and how it informed you.
So we are Catholic Arabs. In the northern part of Baghdad, there's a very small percent of Catholic Christian Arabs, and I am part of that group. Unfortunately, in a majorly Muslim territory, terrorism happens, and that is what happened to us. So one of my first memories being young was my mom was going to go see her father, who was ill, and then the war broke out, and she couldn't see him before he passed. And then I started hearing about friends of ours having to cover each other's bodies in churches while shooters would come into churches in the Middle East and attack them for their religion because they were not Muslim, they were Catholic. And really it hit home really hard. So I was really lucky, and I've always been grateful that we were here during those rough times. But it's funny, my parents were always diehard Republicans. And a lot of that is because they were not against the war in the Middle East. They were for it because they knew what it was like to be on the other side and to be part of it, and what was happening with Saddam Hussein growing up, and how much of a Hitler type leader he was. So I grew up in a home where that was just a constant thing. I understand Arabic. They spoke Arabic. I speak terrible Arabic, but I do understand it. And, you know, it was something that I always heard in my home about what was going on over there, and how they were proud to be American. No, well, they're not American, but to be in America. And I'm first generation American. So that's my secret story that I don't really talk about that often.
It's so interesting, Alina. And I think that we remember the stories of attacks on churches in Iraq, that people were not allowed to practice their Christian faith, that they were hiding in tunnels and underground areas in order to have masses. And there's a lot of, missionary, obviously, outreach for Christians in the Middle East to try to protect their ability to practice their faith. And I just think it's an important element of understanding why people fight so much for freedom in this country that a lot of times people take for granted. And I think that people like you bring a unique perspective to it because you have that understanding.
Yeah. And I think it also explains why I get angry. I remember when I first started going on television, people always said, you don't smile. And I said, well, I actually do smile. I'm a very happy person. But when I'm fighting for somebody who I feel is being persecuted unlawfully, it hits home. And I think that's where a lot of my gusto, for lack of better words, comes from. I'm very protective of people I care about. Obviously, I care very much for President Trump and his family and their well-being, but more importantly for America. And, when I became his attorney, it's funny, Martha, I actually told him in my interview, I was interviewing with him, and then I had to interview with Eric Trump and Alan Garten, the general counsel for the Trump organization. And I told them I'm really happy to represent the organization, to represent the president. However, I will not get involved in politics. He had the last laugh because here I am in the West Wing at the White House. But it's been really a gift from God. And, you spoke a lot about the bishop yesterday and today. And I really commend you because I was watching you in my office and I was saying, it outraged me what she did to the president and preaching from a church. It's such a special place. It's a place where you go for prayer, for reflection. It is not a place where you want to hear somebody's opinion on politics. That was another thing that just really hit home given my background.
Yeah, we're going to actually talk a little bit more about that today because I think that, when someone puts their own interests in front of a moment like that, I just think it hits home for a lot of people. It's a moment where you want to be humbled to be part of that and not exalted, I guess, if I could put it that way. But so, Alina, tell me a little bit about how you just sort of touched on it a little bit, but how did you get to know the president, and how did you become his representative in the New York cases? And then I would just want to ask you a little bit about the status of those appeals and where those stand, because they're the two that are still sort of around.
Right. To start, before I worked for President Trump, I was a member at his golf club in Bedminster, which is very close to my home. And I live not far from there. And I have represented some other people that were members of the club. It was pretty much how any attorney would get around and meet somebody. At Trump Bedminster, there are only a few hundred members. So it was very common, which sounds ridiculous, but it was very common to see President Trump when he got out of the White House. And his grandchildren were in golf camp with my kids, and Ivanka stays at the house, right there, and President Trump stays in a house right on property, and you would see him in his golf cart going to golf, and there's endless footage of all of this, and people taking pictures and all of that. But we'd have a small patio where we'd eat up on the top of the roof area, and the members would eat there. And it probably has 100 people there some nights. And one of the evenings people were talking, and the GC said, the president, I recommended you as a lawyer. He's looking for some attorneys. He wanted to know if any members were attorneys. We know you represent a lot of people here. Can I have your business card? And, he gave it to the president's team. And then the next thing you know, I got an interview. It was in September of 2021. So I had known him. I had seen him. I had spoken to him. I had seen Senator Graham there before, the whole thing. But that was when it really happened. And that was very surreal when I went in to interview with him. I had a meeting. I met some of the other attorneys. And then he asked me to go to New York and meet with Eric Trump and the general counsel of the organization. And it was much like a normal interview. I mean, other than the fact that it was a former president at the time. And so that was a little bit jarring, but it was very normal, talk about my education, what I've done, what cases I've done. But I'd run my own firm, Martha, it's funny because in the news, this is something I've never said, but in the news, they always say this little unknown attorney from New Jersey. Yes, I'm from New Jersey. But my practice was New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and New Hampshire. I'm licensed in 4 states. And I actually ran a massive operation. I owned my own firm when I was 28 years old. I had almost 30 employees. And I ran the largest, my client was one of the largest non-bank mortgage servicing companies in the nation. And probably had about 800 cases, pushing in and out of my firm. And my story did not start with President Trump. It's just what the media thinks. But I had some cases on the news, et cetera. But, working for President Trump puts you in a completely different stratosphere.
The Untold Story continues right after this.
One thing that strikes me, and I've been to the Bedminster Club because I also live in that area. I don't belong there, but I find it just so interesting. He's such a gregarious person. He loves to have people around, and he spends, I think, almost all day, in a sort of weave of working and talking to people, and asking them questions, but his way of working, and tell me if I'm wrong, but it's talking, it's laying things out, it's asking people questions, and so I think that if it's not much of a reach, I don't think, to say that he likes living at a club. It's because he's constantly interacting with people.
And they're incredibly, usually successful people. If you're at one of his clubs, you're probably doing okay for yourself. They're beautiful places. They're not inexpensive to be at. So the people that are there are relatively important people, and they are people that he likes to ask, just regular people. But these are successful individuals in America, and he'll ask what your opinion is on something. And it's not uncommon for him to speak to members all the time, to be on the range and talking to them, or at dinner and pull somebody over, or ask about somebody and have a conversation, or someone walks by his table and stops and says hello, and he asks what they do. That's very normal course for him, as you know. But people have this image of him that he's such a dictator. The truth of the matter is he's so interested in, he's knowledgeable because he's interested, right? He never thinks he knows everything.
That's very true. I mean, the off-camera conversations I've had with him are, tell me, he's met my husband. What does your husband do? Oh, he's a businessman. That's fantastic. He's always interested and remembers these conversations afterwards. And just thinking about this whole club life, it sounds very elite, but really he had a choice. He could have a house in Palm Beach that was surrounded by walls that no one could come into. He could have the same sort of setup in this very beautiful area. Not everyone realizes how beautiful New Jersey is in these areas, but he could have a huge estate that was just surrounded by a big wall, and nobody comes in and nobody goes out. But he chooses to live in these, obviously very beautiful areas, but with a lot of people around, which I find just a very interesting element of who he is.
He's very social. He's very social. He doesn't prefer to eat alone. He prefers to have his business associates or interesting new people or sports people, or he loves athletes. He has a lot of normal interests, and lucky for him, there's literally nobody that would ever say no to having a meal with him. But I mean, I've gotten to meet some people that never in my wildest dreams would I think I would have met. Mike and Kiki Tyson have become friends of mine. That's because of President Trump. I would never have bumped into them in normal course, right? But you are living this world where if you're around him, you see that he's also so genuinely kind, but the same to everyone. Everyone. It doesn't matter if you're staff. It doesn't matter if you're Mike Tyson. He will treat you the same.
Yeah, I think that's a very accurate observation, and I think it is what made him so successful running for president of the United States. And I think it's something that people didn't always anticipate about him. Because he was, this wealthy real estate magnate New Yorker, married to these beautiful women, and but he does really truly treat every person he meets the same, takes an interest in them, and I find that really genuine and authentic, and I do think that's one of the really big things that resonates. He likes to put people together and introduce them to each other. And one of the other things is that, and I remember I think Ivanka said this in the first election that he helped people see in themselves their own ability to succeed in a way that maybe they didn't even see in themselves. And I'm thinking of you when I'm thinking this because, you have a very good education. You're an educated woman who has been very successful at a young age, but you didn't go to Harvard. And, he saw something in you that maybe you didn't see in yourself. Does that resonate with you or no?
The one thing he said, and this is not part of our privileged conversation, so I can say this, but when I started working for him, he wanted me to do TV. And I had never done TV. I was never. And they don't train you. You kind of just go out there. I think we just sued Hillary Clinton for the Russia hoax. And he said to me, "You're going to be a star. I can tell." And I said, "I don't know about that. I just want to win some cases." And he goes, "No, I think you're going to be a star." He's like, "Put her on TV. She'll do well." And he just sent me on my way. Now, I was shaking in my boots, Martha. I mean, I still watched that first TV hit and I had no idea where to look in the camera. As you know, you have to look at this black box. It's really not like you're speaking to somebody. And my eyes were probably looking everywhere else. But he never gave up on me, ever. And there were times I said things on TV maybe he wasn't crazy about, but he never pulled me. He never said, "Don't go on anymore," because he knew something that I never knew, which was that I would be a relatively productive person for him as a spokesperson. And that's where my role kind of evolved with him. And I became eventually a spokesperson and general counsel for his PAC. And now, at one point I was obviously on the campaign as a senior advisor, and now I'm counselor to the president. But that's because of him. So for somebody who most people say doesn't push women, he literally made my brand.
Pushed you out of your comfort zone and saw what he thought you could do in terms of communicating.
He really believed in me. So like when you have somebody like President Trump saying, "You're going to be great. Just keep going. Keep doing it. Keep doing it. Keep doing it." And he's telling his team who will do, they listen, like put her on TV. All of a sudden, this person that they've never met, who's a lawyer, goes on TV for him, and they trust his decisions. And, it's worked out well for me for sure. And I owe him, the majority of the past 4 years. It has really changed my life in an amazing way.
Well, you served him well. I want to ask you a quick question about the real estate case, which was the one that you were the most focused on during all the litigation. It was a non-jury case. The judge was Arthur Engeron. The decision cost now President Trump about $500 million in that area. Correct me if I'm wrong. Where does that stand now? And is he going to get that money back?
So very quickly after the decision, I think it was a $475 million judgment. After that judgment came out, very quickly, the appellate division changed the amount that needed to be bonded to about, a third of that, because they said it was so exorbitant for anybody to put that kind of money up while a case is on appeal. So we never had to put $500 million up, but we put a lot of money in a bond. And currently it is fully argued. I was at the appellate division. We argued it. We argued all of the flaws, the fact that this was a law that never should have been used this way. It's a consumer protection law and 6312, and they used it against an individual in a private company who lost nothing, who nobody complained about anything. Everybody made money. All the loans were paid off. Everything was done on time. And Miss James just inserted herself in a private business. And what people don't realize, Martha, is when I started was part of the investigation phase, and that lasted years before they brought a complaint. Miss James ran on getting Trump. And that's part of the problem in this country. And I've spoken ad nauseum about it. I won't do it here. But, the reality is, I think we will win. I think the appellate division saw, if you look at the argument that we made and what their comments were, they said if they allow the Attorney General of New York to do things like this to a private company, then where is the line? You can't use broad statutes to benefit your own political agenda. You really can't do it. And that's one decision every day. We look and wait for the appellate division to bring us the decision on that. But there were so many flaws. You know, the judge, I could go on for days, but the decisions that were made in the courtroom, the fact that we were gagged, which was completely unconstitutional and crazy, that attorneys were gagged. We couldn't even make a record about certain things that needed to be made a record on because the judge didn't want us to say it in front of the press who were in the courtroom. You know, it was crazy. And remarkable. All those issues are on appeal. And we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. To me, you know, with no jury in a case like that, no opportunity for anyone to weigh in except this judge. And as you say, it was very quickly minimized in terms of the amount of money that had to be found through bond. And we're all very interested. We hope you'll come back when the appeals does come through, Alina. And in the meantime, we look forward to working with you as a counselor to the president as we continue to cover his brand new presidency. We thank you for being here, and it's wonderful to hear more about your personal story.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much for asking. Thank you.
Thanks, Alina. Alina Habba, counselor to President Trump at the White House. And we will be speaking with Alina a lot over the next 4 years. We thank her so much for joining us. This is The Untold Story. We'll see you next time. I'm Martha McCallum. You've been listening to The Untold Story with Martha McCallum. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Make sure to rate and review. For more podcasts, go to foxnewspodcast.com. Listen ad-free with the Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.